Okay, let's begin. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to all the panelists that you can see on the side or in your screens. Just first a quick introduction. This webinar is organized in collaboration of Health Day and the Faces of Digital Health and is supported by the Interreg program and supported by Technology Park Ljubljana. We are extremely happy that you all are here. For those that don't know Health Day is a Slovenian health tech community that is by today already 6 years old. It's partnered with many international organizations. We are a Health 2.0 chapter. We are partnering with Frontiers Health and are trying to keep our community as active as possible and help to the community and connect the members as much as possible. Today, our agenda is going to be very interesting. We are going to start with an overview of the digital health scene and the development through the eyes of Levi Shapiro. Nana Bit Avragim is going to enlighten us about the new potentials about funding in digital health, and then we're going to have a discussion about this. You will be able to ask questions after this roundtable, and we will make sure to give additional answers after the webinar, which is going to be recorded, so you will be able to see it. And now I would like to give the word directly to Levi. So Levi is the founder of mHealth Israel. He's an investor, he's a professor, he's an entrepreneur, a very knowledgeable person, as you will see from his presentation. So Levi, the floor is yours. Please share your screen.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, I'm in the process of trying to share my screen. It'll happen very soon, but I might need some help.
Sure.
I see my presentation. Do you see that or you do not?
No. Did you click the share screen button on the bottom of the Zoom page?
Let's look for that. And we're going to start very soon, as soon as I find that.
Sure.
So,
It's in the middle of the...
Yeah, we got it. Here we go. Okay. Does everyone see that one?
Yeah, we can see your screen, so that's perfect. Just go ahead.
Perfect. And just to maximize, where do I maximize?
Just in a normal way that you would just go to slideshow and start the slideshow.
Okay. Got it.
In the navigation menu. Yeah, so.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, good. So everybody, thank you for joining. The name is Levi Shapiro. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you. I'm coming from Israel, so my remarks are skewed towards an Israeli perspective. What we're going to do in this exercise is backcasting. Imagine it's 2025, we're looking back 5 years ago, and how did COVID-19 impact digital health investment? That's the goal. So I want to begin with a little bit of a kind of a funny opener. There's a Gartner hype curve for every emerging technology, and this is itself emerging. It's the quarantine experience. And at the initial trigger, like many of you, I circled my first action, which was stocking up on toilet paper. I'm not sure where we are exactly. In Israel, we've been in quarantine since March 12th, and now I'm in the stage where I'm in that trough of disillusionment area, I believe, and somewhere in between talking to myself and painting the walls black. So I'm very happy to have this presentation to speak with all of you. And I'd like to now go into a little bit of a self-introduction. This won't take very long. mHealth Israel is the community that I founded. It is a nonprofit supporting all of the Israeli digital health startups and communities, about 7,000 members. We have a LinkedIn page. I invite you all to join us. I'm also running the digital health program at Hebrew University in the Biomed MBA program, which until now was only classroom lectures, but basically all universities are now online learning. So if that's an interest of yours, please contact me. And I'd like to now move forward. And we have about 6 different areas in which, if you're potentially looking back 5 years, how COVID-19 represented an inflection point. So before I do that, I want to emphasize some things don't change, specifically the role of speed. And here in Israel, this is a visual that was created by Startup Nation Central, basically listing a number of companies that have adapted in a very short period with COVID-related products. Whether or not that has an impact on their ability to raise investment and funding, another story, but this is the importance at a time like this, adjusting your offering in a way that recognizes that we have hit an inflection point. So the key trends that I see affecting digital health investment. One, at a high level, is bioconvergence. And we'll talk about all of these in specific slides. Second, pharma is now king. Third, remote medicine spikes. I'm sure you've observed that, and we have as well. Fourth, the decline of direct to consumer. Next, providers and their role. I want to take a deep dive. What happens to providers? One, they are very likely going to step back from the venture game, and providers have been a source of capital for the last particularly 2-3 years. Secondly, there's an area that has been basically under-addressed, which is hospital or provider supply chain and IT efficiency. So we'll talk about all of those areas. First, we've seen some historical investment waves. Typically, there is some trigger, either a technology or a regulatory trigger, and pow, the market explodes. There's a deluge of investment, a flowering of technology startup companies. We've seen that over time, typically every 7 to 10 years, something like that. The triggers that I've seen in my career, first there was 3G. 3G ushered in a wave of all sorts of telehealth and other investment opportunities. There was a spike, and eventually those companies were acquired. Then in 2010, the Affordable Care Act represented a once-in-a-century opportunity. $36 billion of funding by the United States government was dedicated toward electronic health record adoption, for example, and exchanges and enterprise software that could enable that did extremely well. About 5 years ago, we saw big data, the cloud, artificial intelligence. Those technologies enabled more personalized medicine. So a whole wave. Here in Israel, we have more than 550 digital health startups, essentially using IT technologies like blockchain and big data, machine learning, et cetera. That's the present, but where are we going as a result of COVID-19? So I maintain that the first major trend will be that COVID-19 represents a trigger and a move away from silos. Currently, investments are very siloed, focused on biopharma or on digital health or on MedTech, but not quite integrated. And I would like to propose that the goal is efficacy. Governments will spend what is needed, payers will spend what is needed, but it's important that your solution integrates a variety of tools in order to get to higher efficacy. And what I haven't seen on the digital health and device side has been the integration of biology, specifically applying pharma and integrating digital health and device with a variety of disciplines outside of pure science, more IT, like AI, nanotechnology, computation, physics, etc. The players who recognize that bioconvergence with higher efficacy, I think those players will have a true advantage, and I think the funding will follow that. The siloed players will have limited efficacy, and therefore I think it will become a little bit more difficult to differentiate. So trend number one, the compression of silos toward bioconvergence. Trend number two, pharma is king. Pharma is one of the few sectors to have increased in value since the pandemic broke out. Namely, pharma companies are worth more today than they were before the pandemic, and almost no other sector can say that. They're the heroes. The political winds were blowing against them. Now, until there's a vaccine in the United States, I take the position that the United States will not overcome the COVID crisis. That's political, but pharma needs to be your best friend. Somehow, you need to find a way, perhaps your data is useful for clinical trials. Pharma has the money for the next couple of years relative to other players in the industry value chain. So how do you play nice with pharma? Device manufacturers have not seen a steep decline in their public valuations, but the elective surgery is basically on hold in the developed world. And as a result, there's going to be less demand for medical device equipment from the major players. Those players, the Medtronics, they'll be less likely to be making acquisitions in the short term. So pharma is king. What is your strategy? Number three, remote medicine. I think many people have already observed that there's been a transition, and remote medicine is now a priority, that we must find a balance for a high level of medical care and minimum physical contact in order to address COVID, but also to address so many other problems. Hidden within this trend is two sub-trends. One, the increase in, I'd say, another pandemic, which will be the importance of digital mental health. We're going to see a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder from medical professionals. We have a lot of demand right now, latent demand for remote mental health tools. I think that's one sub-theme. And a second sub-theme is, how do you apply these remote tools for the elderly? Because clearly what we found globally is that's an unregulated sector that requires closer scrutiny and attention from governments worldwide. A lot of the breakouts occurred in senior homes. Often it's because of limited regulation. So remote medicine is about to take off. Some subspecialties that perhaps should have been addressed earlier, but will be addressed strongly, I think include mental health and elderly care. Some examples, by the way, this picture, which looks like it's from 12 years ago, this is from about last week, from Israel's largest hospital, which is called Sheba Medical Center, 2,200 beds. They are actually putting telemedicine into the hospital. So contact-free care using a variety of FDA-approved tools plus telemedicine. This is the doctor of the present, and I think we're going to see much more of this as the doctor of the future. Now, that remote medicine needs to be integrated, so there must be a mechanism not only for monitoring and communications, but an FDA-approved physical examination. And companies that were ready for market when this crisis hit are doing extremely well. This is one example. Taito, which I just referenced Shiba, they're being used at Shiba in order to do remote telemedicine. This week, in fact, 2 days ago, announced a $50 million funding. So they were fortunate. They had a great product that was already in market. They responded quickly and deployed. As I said earlier, speed is very important, and they raised a $50 million round. Another Israeli company that raised money this week is called Air Doctor, and essentially it's remote medicine. Travelers can access local private physicians. It was funded by 2 prominent insurance companies, the French insurer AXA, the Israeli-based Phoenix. They were able to raise almost $8 million in the midst of this pandemic. So that was the third trend. There's 6 total. I do want to talk about another trend, which is the decline of direct-to-consumer funding. This is an opinion. Between 2011 and 2019, 21%, according to Rock Health, of total digital health investment went to direct-to-consumer models. In the time of a pandemic, when we really needed efficacy, safety, quality, and efficiency, many of these D2C models were useless, right? So if we want to do testing, those DNA swabs were not approved by the FDA, for example. And I think we're going to see a real transition, a flight to quality. And if your model is direct to consumer and it's more of a wellness product, I think what we found is we need efficient models to include existing processes that integrate the health systems, payers, and providers. Direct to consumer, to me, feels like when we really had a need, they weren't the best solution, and we'll see less and less funding in that direction. 2 more trends to address, and they're both related to hospitals. Over the last few years, there's been quite a bit of investment from providers. So for example, Kaiser Permanente has $800 million in management, 65 investments over 20 years. Ascension Ventures is roughly the same scale. A number of the major providers have always had their own spin-out arms, but we really did see over the last couple of years more and more corporate venture capital coming from US providers. In fact, as we see on the slide, over half of those venture funds affiliated with providers are less than 5 years old. I think we're going to see less of that. Certainly the new money, it will be dedicated to stop the bleeding at providers. Providers will get a bailout from the United States government. Rural providers outside of the major cities will have enormous challenges basically surviving. There was already consolidation. Bottom line, providers as a source of institutional capital will decline, and those that are in the game are going to transition, I believe, or at least place greater emphasis on commercializing their own intellectual property, their own in-house or complementary intellectual property. So the last trend I want to address before I share the platform, basically, until now, there's been very little activity in supply chain, healthcare supply chain. And we've seen so much of this crisis related to the supply chain. Many providers find themselves with a lack of supplies, with quality issues related to products that have expired. Physicians are wasting a good deal of their time on supply chain activities. Already, the larger hospitals were using their own supply infrastructure, warehouses, distributors, Smaller hospitals falling behind in that regard. So what can startups do to address this really big problem? Last year, the average margin of a US provider was 2.2%. That varies greatly depending on private or nonprofit or community, which is rural. However, with margins like that, I think this is a very, very big opportunity for startups to address. I'm going to move quickly and just share some recent fundings that are going after some of these IT and supply chain inefficiencies. An annex round from NIM Health. NIM Health does autonomous medical coding, addressing revenue cycle. People are important in healthcare. We really need people. We use too many people in the US health system. And as a result, tools that enable a more effective revenue cycle optimization, but without the people, I think have great potential. NIM is one example. And an acquisition last month, Orpheus Medical. By the way, these are Israeli examples. This is an informatics platform related to archiving images, video, et cetera, which was basically integrating a lot of disparate, heavy data. IT systems weren't equipped for that. So improving the efficiency of IT and supply chain systems is a great opportunity. I'm going to now turn this back to Tessa, and thank you very much for allowing me to present.
Thank you, Levi. So now we're going to continue with Nana, who is going to share her thoughts or her findings on the research about the funding that has been changing in the last years, and it's for sure going to change in the future. So Nana, you can start with explaining what is this new word, collaboration.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much. Greetings from Berlin. So I think we are living in a very fascinating time where the past, present, and the future coming in the same current time point. And this is a fascinating opportunity for everyone to collaborate to build something new. And collaboration basically describes two nouns, collaboration and competition, meaning that the competing company which in the same market coming together to build something profitable and to share the one joint market. So, and I think the collaboration or competition, it's the particular description and particular situation where now everyone working in digital health, biotech, MedTech, and other healthcare industry have a fantastic chance to mobilize the old resources. And I think was never ever been, of course, it's very tragic time. We lost a lot of people, but in the same time, I think to be an entrepreneur and to start a company, it might be sounds very too optimistic, but start company in biotech or digital health now, especially with the focus on telemedicine, it's never been better time to do that. And I completely agree with Brett Belkitz, who is the founder of Toronto-based virtual health tech company Maple, that we don't need to wait for crises or urgencies to understand the value of health technologies and applications. So I would love to give you some most recent, maybe personal experiences over the last few weeks. And I think I would love to give you some tangible examples about adaptability, co-creation, repurposes, and building new models. The first examples comes from tech area from Canada. I've been a few weeks ago there, just in exactly the time when started the whole pandemic, and I've seen how is the tech area can be very fast in adapting the current situation. So they come with a very interesting models, which I think 100% adaptable in healthcare. So they started building like companies like Candidly, it's HR company, tech HR company, providing the tech talents across Canada and United States. They started building a free money-free marketplace, meaning that offering the free services for startups struggling to recruit the talents. Another fantastic example, Startup North, where the different startups working also in HR area, trying to support those ones who lost the jobs. They're trying to provide career counseling and so on and so on. And what exactly Levi mentioned currently regarding the supply chain, I think this is the next big thing in healthcare as well as in biotech. A company like Tealbook, it's a Canadian also awkward based company. They offering currently free access. It's a supply chain company. They're offering a free access to the worldwide vendor supply database to help anyone, any companies, SMEs, small startups working to fight the COVID-19 pandemic and find the right supply chain solution, whether it would be in biotech, whether it would be in pharma, whether it would be in healthcare. So I think this is the very tangible solutions and the very interesting opportunities what we can learn and build. The next example, and in that case, Levi mentioned that the pharma is king. I would probably be more pushy and will push back, Levi, saying that I would say the biotech is king. Pharma is like Cyclica. It's 4 or 5 years old, Toronto-based company providing the AI solutions for drug discoveries. Currently is building and offering a lot of opportunities and to direct to consumer or collaborative opportunities, offering the specifically packages to enter and to the portfolio of different compounds and different options by informaticians options to screen compounds, screen epitopes, to find the vaccine or a diagnostic test. So if you are in biotech, if you are working on fighting the COVID-19, I mean in research or in diagnostic, that is the best ever opportunity to build a cooperative marketplace, work with those companies which are currently offering a lot of free services. Another example is coming from Norway, where the SME company Immunitrack working on immune solutions for cancer patients. They currently published open access the database with 174 potential epitopes which can be used to make a vaccine for COVID-19. So I'm a big fan of open science, and I think it's also open science has currently a very specific value, and the value is through the transparency and the free access to knowledge, and which we currently this is a very much on demand and very and those consortium as structural genomic consortium, it's a consortium which was founded 2008 by Elliot Edwards in Toronto, offering various solutions and database regarding the proteases, enzyme solutions, enzyme databases in Oxford, in Canada, in Toronto University, and other Karolinska University. So they basically are offering a lot of interesting options and opening the reagency or opening the databases for everyone who interested in collaboration. Another model which is specifically not address the digital health or other kind of healthcare transformation. It's a model of radical generosity. It's basically a female founders supporting model, which also came from Canada and quite successful. But the example which I would like to bring it up, it's example of community-driven crowdsourcing. The women entrepreneurs and investors invest in women-led companies, and it's not about the feminism or supporting just women entrepreneurs. It's about the building a network of investors and companies. And through the radical generosity, it means that interest-free loan, the company will be supported for the 5 years. And that concept is quite successful, and it's approved, showing that currently they have over 5,000 activators, as they call investors, and over 60 companies were funded in the recent times. So it's basically a very good example how to build a community and how to start investing in local communities, in the local industries, and in the local interesting companies. In the recent weeks, the time is so dynamic. I can't say in the recent years. It's a lot of interesting stuff and news coming every day, and updating and basically changing our understanding of the business modeling and financing, mostly like weekly. So in the recent 3 weeks, I participated in almost 3 hackathons in Italy, in online hackathons. Hack for Italy in Germany was organized by German government. You can see it was overwhelmed with 20,000 participants, and presented over 1,000 projects. And next week, 20 best solutions winning projects will be awarded by Chancellor Merkel. It's all about agile crowdsourcing. So if you're in the biotech, if you're in digital health or MedTech, and you have a particular product which can be applied to purposes, and you interested in building a new prototype, this is the way how you could crowdsource, how you can enter, and how you can build new partnerships and enter the new market. And the next opportunity coming this weekend, it's organized by Hacking Health. It's grassroots initiatives also from Canada, which has some roots in Germany, in Berlin, and also in France. And you probably are familiar with this grassroots initiatives through Tiaja's fantastic podcast and interview which she conducted last year. The hackathon will be organized this weekend, and I can encourage everyone else, if you're interested in, and if you're looking for new partnerships, looking for interesting solutions, and you very agile and fast building prototypes, just try to participate. It's online, and it's going over 2 days. So the trend which Levi already mentioned, and I would definitely also say that it's never ever been better time to start company telemedicine is telehealth. You can imagine that German market was quite beyond the all current development in digital health. We were unfortunate that we didn't have, there was a lot of regulations, a lot of discussions and debates about the privacy and so on and so on. And basically the rule was that every physician or general practitioner had opportunity to consult every 5th patient, so about roughly 20% of their time they could spend on online consultation. Starting from April 1st, the rules are changed. So this is the message what I said at the beginning. We don't need the crisis or urgent situations to make the right decision at the right time. So, but the National Association of Statutory and Private Health Insurance allowed all physicians to use unlimited use of video consultation for free. And here's the providers, and every doctor in Germany, or probably in Switzerland also, they can log in this, find this on any of this company and use the platform for free. The winner here also, we have some amazing company who are this time can fundraise, and I can also mention the teleclinic company in Munich, which is just not fundraise but extend their portfolio. And this is very interesting. Then you have a telemedicine telehealth company, but you build a more integrated solution where you can apply also other online services, including they're offering also a test, and they're offering a test for COVID-19. It's not for free, but specifically it would be possible to test anyone who is sitting currently at home on remote work. So, and here's also example from Canada, and Maple company, which I mentioned at the beginning, is basically offering not just the teleconsultation, but also e-recipes, also the online appointments and online care solutions. So this is awareness in the current situation. I think the trend will be going beyond and for the next couple of years. So the more telemedicine, the more virtual integrated solution we have, the better. I think I would skip this, but it's also about the peer-to-peer platforms where the different online providers and online companies building ad hoc solutions to find and to offer new services. So how about the funding? And the funding, of course, coming from different areas. I was thinking that you probably will be interested in learning about talking about Europe. All eyes is coming for sure on Horizon 2020, and I thought probably you will be interested in funding opportunities provided by Horizon 2020 program. So early enough, European Union started to build innovative medicine initiative, and this initiative has several calls. And the recent calls, if you are working in the area of biotech, MedTech, and digital health, and you have a product which can be related to COVID-19 outbreak. So this is the information where you can try to apply with it. But most interesting application, I would suggest, especially the tech companies, the cloud-based companies, might be addressed to European Open Science Cloud funding, fast-track funding opportunities. Just last week, they announced the call, and the call, I think it still runs until the end of the next week. So please double check and look whether any of you working in this area can apply for fast track funding opportunities. So German Research and Education Ministry, of course, invests a lot of money in developing vaccine, but it's a probably long-term strategy just to focus for sure on diagnostic and learning more about the virus, about the nature of the virus, and different options. But in the same time, it's a long-term options. The lessons learned from these epidemics will be applied for any other probably pandemics or epidemics which can be prevented in a better way. And the ministries, the local ministries, the federal ministries, they're trying to keep alive on startups, and they're trying to support them at least for the first time. But interesting things that they're also big corporates, and here's example of the most famous, the German software company SAP, which you can definitely appreciate and acknowledge in any healthcare provider working on SAP software. They established and announced again emergency fund, and I had some calls with the SAP colleagues, and they said any companies, SMEs, software companies working in this area who had already partnerships or interested in getting in partnerships with SAP, they're very much welcome to apply and to get in touch with a local representative of SAP. The most interesting, and I think that would be probably tangible solutions for early stage startups working in on emerging technologies applications, is the creative destruction lab call. Creative Destruction Lab, one of the first company building concept, came from Canada, Toronto. They offering a fantastic mentoring opportunity, and best the companies worldwide coming from like Deep Genomics, like I have to come up with the idea, but Deep Genomics, one of the most famous companies, they came from basically support of the Creative Destruction Lab concept. So they opened just right 2 days ago. They have this call, and if your products is related to emerging technologies, it means that blockchain-based artificial intelligence, AR, VR, with applications, life sciences and health. So please don't miss this opportunities. This is a very competitive program, but you still have a super great opportunity to learn and to be mentored how to bring your product on the market, how to win, how to get investment. And this is currently, I think it's a very critical question. So basically, I try to get you through different ideas and different and most recent developments, what I've seen in the recent weeks. But I think the bottom line is that currently we have to probably rewrite the whole futuristic playbook when the wild card is a new normal. And I would think the king would be the wild card, and the king would be, from my view, not the pharma who is trying to repurpose the current pipeline drugs, but probably the most innovative and most agile and adaptable companies who are thinking out of the box, who are trying to be co-creative and shifting from individual to more collective and more empathetic mindset. Thank you so much. So wishing you all the best and stay healthy and well.
Thank you, Nana. I will stop your screen share. And before we begin with the poll, actually with the panel, I have again a quick poll for our participants. So I am interested in knowing a little bit about what industry do you work in and what are your expectations of the future that COVID-19 is going to bring. So what are your expectations of the effects of this pandemic on your business? I will give you a minute or two just to go through these 4 questions that we prepared so you can answer them. Do you see the poll?
Mm-hmm. So do you think we have?
Yeah. The first results are already coming in, so we'll just give our participants a minute to go through this. So I'm going to try to also share my screen after this. So I hope you can still see the poll, but I did want to share another information with you all that came in just yesterday. So this is an analysis of Startup Health, which is continuously providing us with reports about the digital health industry. And they did a comparison about all the new technologies that seem to be promising in this pandemic. And as you can see on this slide, there's been a 168% growth in year-to-year funding of remote and continuous monitoring. There's been an extreme growth in telemedicine and access to care. I do have to emphasize that an important factor in the US is that Medicare expanded the coverage for telemedicine, which additionally helped expand the availability of these solutions to consumers. And then we have another interesting graph which shows how the funding of digital health has been changing in the last years. As we can see, it's been growing very rapidly, and this is exactly what we are going to discuss in the discussion that's about to follow, and that is what exactly can we expect from the future and what should we be mindful of. So I'm going to end the poll. We don't have the results from everyone. We'll take a look at the results at the end of the panel. So now I would just kindly ask all the panelists to turn on their microphones. The panelists are going to be Levi, Nana, which I didn't introduce before. So Nana is a digital health business architect currently based in Berlin. She worked for Singularity University in Berlin, Charité Hospital, with startups. So she's definitely a great source to go to if you are interested in the digital health or health tech industry. Nana also has a medical background. Giovanni is the CEO of BioValley Investments. He's from Italy and an investor, so we look forward to your opinion regarding the future of funding. And then we also have Blaž Triglav from Slovenia. Blaž is the CEO of a Slovenian startup, Mediately, which has 100,000 doctors on their drug registry app, which is a decision support system for doctors. So first, I would like to just do a quick overview of what has been going on in the 4 countries that you all are coming from when COVID-19 broke out. So Giovanni, let's start with you. Obviously, Italy was hit the hardest, also because for 4 weeks, the epidemic probably went basically unnoticed, or there wasn't such radical measures weren't taken as they were in other European countries. That I think Italy was the primary example that made others realize that actions need to be taken quickly. So in your opinion, what is the current state? What do you think can be learned from Italy, and how is the whole situation there now?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. I go immediately to the point. Basically, you are right. We have been a little bit slow at the beginning, but unfortunately, we were also the first. And even if now we assume to have reached the peak, which means after probably 2 months and something. The main issue, and this is something that I would strongly suggest to other countries, was that we were aware to have a sort of very, very important health system, so very widespread all over the territory. And in some way, we didn't realize that basically you don't just need an health system, but you need within the health system a dedicated health system for an emergency like that. That's the reason why, especially within our hospitals or other structure that hosted old people, there has been since the beginning a total separation of the situation, so that there has been a lot of cross uncontained virus infections, and this caused an enormous problem to be managed on the day on. And so this is the first feedback that I can give you. And the second one probably is that still now we are not so ready to manage when an outbreak is coming out. So there are a lot of numbers running away, death, new infected, whatsoever, but the capability to go straight exactly where you have to intervene immediately to contain a problem, this is still a problem. I have to tell you that in a country like Italy with 60 million people, maybe is not so easy. But these are the two main outcomes that I can tell you.
Nana, Germany has been in the news about coping the situation very well, that the number of deaths, relatively speaking, is very low. So what's your thought regarding that? And I think you're muted, so please unmute yourself before you start talking.
Thank you. Yes, I think, as I mentioned, we are currently in a very dynamic situation, and I think a lot of critical points was raised in the previous weeks that the healthcare system, even it was kind of starting and be prepared in January, February for potential pandemics. It was quite slow, and reaction and basically starting the testing and making the testing more available was quite slow. But I have to say that in Germany has the point was highly criticized in the previous years. The number of the intensive beds per 100,000 population was the highest number, I think, might be definitely in Europe, because Germany has about 29,000 intensive beds in per 100,000, comparison to Italy, which has 12.5 thousand. So now this capacity was increased up to the 40,000 beds. So that was probably the critical point what before, which was criticized and was basically a negative feedback on the health ecosystem. Currently is a major benefit to provide very professional and let's say high quality emergency health and care. Also the situation with ventilators and situation with suppliers was not so bad. So that means the new strategies and investment, especially from research side in developing the diagnostic test and different diagnostic tests. We're talking about not just molecular diagnostic, but also serological diagnostic antibody test is going quite well. And in that case, probably that is the outcomes what we see currently now. The current situation that 50,000 tests will be available per day in Germany. So they would love to, authorities would like to increase these numbers up to the 100,000. And I think the goal is to reach and to screen about 1 million population. So this data is quite essential, critical to understand and predict the situation, economical situation, as everyone else is waiting for this information, and to basically give option industry and companies starting working and coming back to normal. Regarding the industries and the trends, I think I mentioned already the biotech, and I think in terms of the it's not like a black and white situation. What we see, not everything is a good or bad. It's a kind of the situation where every company, every entrepreneur, even the research center has to rethink, reorient, and repurpose the preserve strategies to find the best solution in that case. And I think for MedTech, imaging technologies probably will be the best and winning technologies in terms of investment and in terms of fundraising. I was thinking about EdTech. We didn't touch this point, but the EdTech and applications EdTech in medicine and currently different technologies which is ad hoc and offering to provide the very correct and right knowledge to nurses and medical doctors. I think that was also one of the major problems at the beginning, that the wrong communication and lack of education in that case was probably also hold the whole ecosystem in all countries, doesn't matter where it was, Germany, in Italy, in Spain. So that was the one of the barrier which we right now trying to get over and to catch up with that situation.
Is there any effect of the law that was accepted last year in Germany? So the e-health law that's enabling faster adoption of digital health solution. Is that in any way helping in the faster spread of digital solutions to tackle COVID?
Yes, of course. So I think it's encouraging a lot of more companies. First of all, the early stage startups will probably try to stay on business. It will be never be the business as usual, but they will try to get a governmental funding and help at least. But I think this situation accelerated implementation of the new digital law, which was taken in force at the beginning of this year. And that probably definitely will adapt and implement a lot of options and regulations. There was a lot of discussions regarding the insurance companies and the reimbursement models, but now I think it's a lot of experiments and a lot of situations will be just be running in the last minute. Still, I have to say that still some of the companies are fundraise quite nicely, so they're getting very fast track fundraising screening. And I was basically approached by, as a mentor of a couple of startup in Europe. I was approached by several investors who were quite interested in investing in startups in Europe, working on digital therapeutics or any kind of telemedicine solution.
Levi, how would you assess the way Israel approached the COVID-19 pandemic? Israel is known for very rapid responses. You've got a lot of high-tech technologies. So what can you share?
Well, Israel has been practicing social distancing with its neighbors for 72 years. So we were quite ready for, we're used to crises. We're used to responding in emergencies. We're also geographically very small. And so there's the famous Milton Friedman quote about what ideas are handy in the time of a crisis. I would amend that. What startups are handy in the time of crisis? So we talked about Taito earlier, a couple others, Datos and BioBeat. These were FDA approved startups that were handy, that were already in the wild, and very quickly, locally, they were able to deploy. So we had some technologies to address COVID very readily available that basically provide the safety and efficiency and didn't need to go through an extensive approval process. That's the winners, not necessarily frontier tech and the latest and greatest. And that's being applied. Relatively good outcomes here so far with COVID. With the one exception, similar to Korea, is religious gatherings. The ultra-religious represent 12% of the population and 32% of the cases. Because that's a very different community to penetrate with the messaging, as Nana said. I do want to just for a minute, I'm also an American, and I wouldn't mind just from the point of view of startups, the United States is about half of global healthcare spend, and what I'm also hearing from the US is quite different. And I don't think the United States really is going to get out of this until there's a vaccine. So that will have an enormous impact for every startup, because ultimately the United States is sort of the path to exit. A lot of the funding originates there. 3 states, California, Massachusetts, and New York, represent 90% or more of venture funding. And guess who's gotten hit the hardest? Those 3 states. So the money that's already in the pockets of existing funds, they've got a lot of interest in deploying. But I think that there will be far less new funds raised, and a lot of money will be dedicated for follow-on rounds for existing portfolio. I mentioned Taito. Those were 3 new investors, and they were institutionals. Insight only does growth stage. Qualcomm, corporate, they're used to doing C and D rounds. So you better conserve cash. It's all about free cash flow. Orient yourself for at least 18 months if you can. Easy to say, right, from my comfortable little chair here in Tel Aviv, but try to conserve cash and plan for about 18 months if possible, because we're about to enter a real slow period for new funds.
So this is a perfect way to go to Blaž, who is the CEO of a startup. So Blaž, are you doing what Levi said? So how are you as a CEO managing the crisis to enable the company to work well in the near and farther future? And how is Slovenia, in your opinion, coping with COVID?
Maybe to first address the point of how we're doing. Yes, we're doing exactly what Levi said. We basically got calls from all of our investors within a few days in the beginning of March saying, guys, get ready for a tough time. The healthcare crisis is going to last about a quarter, but the economic crisis is probably going to last more than a year, if not 2 years. So we very quickly absorbed that advice and started looking into extending our runway so we are very quickly profitable and not reliant on additional fundraising, because as Levi said, the economic situation is going to be pretty bad for the next year or 2 for startups, unless you're a telemedicine startup. But as we saw from the list that Nana and Levi were showing, there's about 30 or 40 companies doing that already, with about a few $100 million in the pocket of advantage of anyone else who's trying to do that right now. In terms of Slovenia's response, I think we were, as most other countries except for Italy, quite lucky that we got the warning signs from Italy. And we got these measures implemented, relatively strict measures implemented relatively quickly. They've even been made more strict in the past 2 weeks, so people can't leave their own city. There's an increased social distancing measure. We have to wear masks in public places, indoors, and so on. And people have been very kind of sticking to those rules quite well. We have 20 to 30 infections per day. And we're doing quite a lot of testing as well, but that rate of infection has been relatively flat for the past two or 3 weeks. I think, as in most other countries, people are getting rather anxious and are kind of anticipating when the restrictions will be lifted. But I think that's generally true for everyone around the world. But I think we have a few more weeks of sitting inside ahead of us before we can ease restrictions a bit more easily.
Just a second before we share the results of the poll that we did, you have an app that's direct to doctors, so it's actually direct to users, so which gives you a unique position in healthcare. Because I want to ask you, how did you respond agilely to this crisis to aid doctors?
So yeah, very early on we realized that by having this access to these 100,000 doctors, we have a great opportunity to address their needs directly. But we really wanted to know what those needs were. So very early on, we launched a poll among our doctors. More than 10,000 doctors responded, and they shared their needs and concerns. So all of our activities that we did stemmed from the answers that they gave us, what information they need, which support they need, and so on. So our first activities were directly at that. We started developing clinical decision support algorithms about handling cases. That was the #1 concern everybody expressed, how to handle potential cases. Then a lot of questions were asked about how to use protective equipment, how much, how frequently to change it, and so on. So we shared instructions on using protective equipment directly in the app. We also explained current treatment options and published research that started coming in, because there was a lot of misinformation in terms of which drugs are effective, which aren't. And still to this day, I think there's a lot of confusion in that area. And we used local information where possible, because we didn't want to contradict local guidelines and create a mess that way. But in a lot of countries, local guidelines weren't available. So in that cases, we used international or European guidelines and translated it into 7 languages, because we already work with a network of medical translators and in the markets where we are. So we could quickly translate it into every language where we were present. And that was basically that. And every week we followed up on what's still important, what's still missing, and kept adding information. And we're doing this to this day, right? So basically the focus was just asking doctors what do they need, what are they worried about, and then addressing that as soon as possible, but limiting it to credible and evidence-based information, because there was a huge amount of reliable and unreliable information floating about, and we just wanted to focus it on the evidence-based part for the doctors.
May I just add that the UK-based organization Orca, which is a leading organization for review of apps, published results that there are over 500 apps that have COVID in them. And on March 13, I think 85% of those apps did not meet the requirements that Orca has to make them reliable. So I would suggest, if anyone's looking for that, to just go to Orca's website, where they have apps that can be relied upon. I am now sharing the results of the poll that we did earlier. As you will see, we have a lot of companies that are coming from digital health, some of them from biotech, a lot of them from other industries that are not among the those mentioned in the poll. And regarding the expectations on the business in the next months, there's 30% of respondents said that they are suffering from decreased revenue. There's quite a lot that responded that there's an increased interest for their product. Only 12% expect layoffs to ensure financial stability. And then if we just look also at the question whether or not people think that funding will be harder to attract in the upcoming years for them specifically, so not in general, I must say I'm surprised, because 35% of participants said that they do not expect that. Most of the companies are based in Europe. We have some from the US and other countries. So to our panelists, Giovanni, if I were a startup, I would be interested in knowing what's your mindset at the moment as an investor. Are you thinking the same way as investors were thinking in 2008 when the recession started? In the questions that we received prior to the webinar, some people asked us, when can they expect that investors would start assessing startups the same way as they did before the crisis? So what's your opinion at the moment? What can startups expect at the moment or in the future?
Okay, my opinion is that in this period, I see that especially as regards last crisis, there are much more opportunities, and the mood as far as my position as an investor, I tell you that especially in our sector, which is health, Italy is completely changing the rules of the game, and now the possibility to invest in companies that normally have the usual problem not to be able to sell to the public sector. Today, these boundaries are completely open, and so if you can find really innovative things related to digital health, whatsoever, biotech, whatsoever, we think that today, especially for Italy, it's a booming situation. You need to select, but this kind of crisis, this kind of emergency, for the first time, change the culture of the so-called buyer of the products produced by the innovators. So this is very important, because when you have to manage and to invest in startups, sometimes it's difficult for them to present their business model, to present their products, their services. Today, the kind of attention that the potential buyers of what startups are offering is incredibly high. And so this is a huge opportunity to invest money in very interesting initiatives and having a very fast return on what you're doing. So I think that it's a very different crisis, and this one has changed in favor of startup a lot, the possibility to be protagonist of this changing period, which is just amazing. That's it.
Levi, would you share to add your comment? You already were very vocal about the situation in the US and expectations. There's no doubt that some digital health startups are going to be the winners in this situation. However, there are smaller businesses and MedTech companies that simply cannot afford to go 3 months without any internal income and are facing the threat of extinction. So, what do you think regarding just the future and what can be done from their perspective?
I don't think it's great news right now. We're about to see a global pullback. I agree that the health system is in a very unique position, as Giovanni mentioned. I'm quite bullish about the United States. I'm an American, you may be able to hear that. And, you know, my antenna are a little more sensitive to the United States. I would encourage all of the companies listening to perceive yourselves and create an infrastructure so that you are a services company and not leading with technology. I want to reemphasize Taito, some of the other companies that deployed quickly in Israel when there was need were selected because it didn't require extensive provider resources. They were selected, and many US providers heard about these deployments and really did proactive outreach. Because those companies could quickly stand up a service, they were very attractive to their customers. And so I would emphasize that if you're showing business plans that say stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, we're going to be real valuable when we collect enough data. You know, maybe it's time to go back to business school or do something else for a while, because you're not going to get funded if that's the plan.
Blaž, I want to turn to you at this point to be very practical. So, because you're a startup, you already know how it is if you are expecting funding and don't get it, or if you're searching funding and there's nothing on the horizon. What did you do when the crisis started? So how are you managing? Are you laying people off? Do you think you will have to? Are your salaries decreased at the moment? So just give us some insight.
Yeah, so purely from a practical standpoint, as soon as these things happened, aside from working remotely and so on, we took a look at all of our expenses and immediately called up any vendors that we saw that could potentially give us a discount, for example, on the rent, on other expenses that were tied to the office, on other services that were maybe, let's say, advertising services. Because, for example, when we advertise to doctors, and more than 40–50% of doctors right now aren't actively working in the clinic. So it's kind of a mismatch of trying to push them a clinical decision support tool to use in the clinic while they're sitting at home, right? So these were kind of the, let's say, non-essential expenses that we could cut. And that already got us to a level where we are not worried about our runway for the foreseeable next few months. That meant that we don't have to fire anyone. We don't have to put anyone on the waiting list. We don't have to cut salaries at this point. And if business continues relatively as it has in March and now looking in April, we won't have to do that. But I always try to prepare for a worst case scenario, because if you don't, you're going to be very surprised when it hits, right? So when we were discussing these things, we also said, okay, let's create a kind of, we jokingly call it, we're all eating rats scenario, you know, where everything goes to hell and the economy falls by 20–30%, because that's a realistic fear if this wouldn't be contained. We're talking about discussions we had weeks ago, right? And we created those scenarios. We said, okay, what do we need to do in that case to still maintain what we have right now? So no layoffs and so on. We created scenarios for all of those cases, and now we're just following along and seeing where we land on these curves, right? Right now it's looking okay, but as Levi kind of mentioned, the economic outfall still hasn't happened, right? That's still coming. The healthcare one has, but the economic one is coming. So it's just good for startups to be prepared. And I've talked to a lot of startups which, you know, we have kind of sustainable revenue. We are creating our own revenue, so that wasn't so much of a problem for us. But a lot of startups are living month to month, or are living fundraise to fundraise. and there have been layoffs immediately. There have been cuts, significant cuts immediately. So I think startups should be prepared to either make those moves now or not be surprised in 2 or 3 months when maybe they'll have to make them. So kind of prepare yourself for the worst, and if it's better than that, you're already doing better than expected, right?
I would now urge the attendees to ask some questions and just write them down in the chat if there are any. And while you do that, Nana, perhaps a question for you. So very quickly, it became clear that in self-isolation, people are changing their habits in the health sense. A lot of people are stacking on comfort foods. We are using online deliveries in a higher matter than we did before. So some predictions already say that because this pandemic is going to take a while, that big tech and telemedicine companies are going to be the winners also, because the habits that consumers are adopting now are going to stick with them even when things turn to normal. So what's your expectation in that regard, especially in Europe, which has public healthcare systems and is adopting all the new technologies much, much slower than the US, for example? Not to even mention Asia and China, which are light years ahead in this sense, which is also why China was able to mitigate the crisis pretty well, because they're so used to online to offline industries to work well.
Here in Germany, likely and happily, we're learning very fast and learning by collecting the recent experiences. And I think if I would be investor and if I would choose the area to invest, I will definitely go with the well-being and wellness industry, which is very close to mental health and digital health, because I think this is, like Giovanni and other panelists mentioned, the opportunity coming are really huge. We can't estimate this opportunity at the current stage, because the situation still on sort of kind of unstable, but opportunities, especially in mental well-being, in education, in e-learning, and in everything applying to health, applying for health technologies, for healthcare is a huge. And in that case, I think these applications, and we're changing our culture. So I just can mention that the most famous situation in Germany, where the privacy rules were very put on the major restrictions to adopt some technologies. Currently, just I think a few days ago, the research center Robert Koch Institute launched an app and encouraged everyone, which will surveillance app, which will just follow the mobility of population, encourage everyone to share the data. Means that everyone can share their fitness track data to enable the authorities to track the the population and how they are mobile in that case. I think this is a fantastic example of adaptation, how fast we can adopt, how fast we can just go over the rules, how fast we can develop the new rules and the new culture and the new mindset. So, but wellness and well-being, and especially with application to mental health, would be basically one of the winners in that situation.
Levi, we have a question for you, and that is, it's related to China and the trends in digital health there, especially digitizing traditional Chinese medicine. If you have any insight in that regard, otherwise we're also going to find the answer after this webinar, and we are planning to prepare a report which all the participants are going to receive.
So just a comment about China. China underinvests in their health system. We talked about the potential implications. I think politically, there are enormous implications globally. China currently has an aging population, and only somewhere around 4.5% to 5% of GDP is dedicated to healthcare, which is completely misaligned with the rapid economic growth. And I think one of the outcomes from this crisis in China is there will be a massive investment in sort of elevating the level of infrastructure for China to make it commensurate with its basically first world economy. Specifically related to traditional Chinese medicine, I really don't have an informed answer. Until now, I would have been very reluctant to encourage startups to undertake entering the Chinese market. But we will see, in terms of global dollars, just a massive amount of investment going towards the Chinese healthcare system. Politically also, again, I feel like I'm, Mr. United States over here, but every election since 2010 has been about healthcare in the United States, and this one will absolutely be about healthcare. And that could have tremendous implications for startups because it is such a dominant market. So somebody asked a question online, it must be a terrible time to start a company. I think the opposite. I think starting a company is extremely capital efficient. It's a very difficult time to be investing in scaling a company and hiring and paying sales staff. So go ahead and start companies, please. This is a great time, but just be cognizant of what the next 5 years will look like, and don't start a company that would have been a huge success in 2016. Think of what type of company the world needs in 2025.
Does any of the panelists have any additional feedback regarding the whole topic or anything else that you would like to add or tell our participants before we wrap up?
Maybe I'll just reiterate what Levi said. It's actually a very good time to start a startup because a lot of the world is going to change in the next few years, and those opportunities are visible now. If you follow the trends, you're gonna be in the right position in 2 or 3 years when the economy kicks back up to ride that wave. We started our startup shortly after the first crisis in 2008. It hit Slovenia most severely in 2011, and that's when we started. And it's been the right decision because it makes you capital efficient, it makes you realize that there's no free lunch, and it makes you focus more on the value you're delivering, less than on the free capital that's been flowing through the startup world in the past few years.
And I would like to just briefly address one of the questions which I've seen in chat about the use of and applications of telemedicine at home. Of course, we have already some potential winners, and the companies which are currently on the market and the European market, like a Cree company from Sweden. It was extended to Germany, and currently everyone has these free services regarding the COVID-19 situation, and other companies which I mentioned already. And then we have also Ada Health, it's a symptoms checker. So we have actually a lot of access to telemedicine solutions currently on the market, and it's just the way how we can use, how we can apply, and then just the market offers a lot of options, a lot of opportunities, and I think it's I completely agree with everyone else. So it's you just have to be very focused and selective what area you're going to start, and then what market you will bring your product. But it looks not that bad as we thought. But regarding the future, I think the whole, for me, it's a question of the forecast and the future predicting. So I think a lot of things will be going about the predicting the next steps, but at the same time, we should accept the wild cards. We should accept some unexpected situations, which will definitely change our gameplay.
You also received another question, Nana. So how successful is the collaboration between private and public sector in using telemedicine app, specifically triage for COVID-19, if you have any information, and then we really will wrap up with today's webinar.
Currently, I think it's everything in dynamics. So currently, at the moment, I cannot come up with the example in telemedicine, but the private-public partnerships are quite essential and quite successful. What, from my perspective, the European Institute of Technology and with the arm in health has a lot of interesting programs, which it's a private-public organization which supports a lot of startups working in 16 European countries, including Israel since last year, and supporting with interesting program to accelerate and to catalyze this innovation and in 3 different areas: MedTech, health tech, digital health, and biotech. And that probably one of the successful examples which are existing on the market, but not specifically telemedicine. For telemedicine, I think probably I would expect that would come new associations, new private-public organizations with a focus on telemedicine, obviously.
Okay, well, thank you for that insight, and thank you all the panelists for taking the time today to join us and to share your very different perspectives from the different countries that you are based in. I would also like to thank our attendees that took the time to join us and ask questions. As I mentioned, we will prepare a report about the findings of this session, which you will all receive in a short while after the webinar. We will also publish the webinar again. It is going to be published also in an audio form on my podcast, Faces of Digital Health. So do check that as well. A big thanks goes to Project Arte for supporting this project. And again, I would just like to thank you all for being here. Keep following Health Day. We have a lot of content also on the website healthday.si. Among other things, you can find an interview with Nana and an interview with Blaž there. Blaž talked about their certification process for the MDR, and plenty more content is about to come. So this is all from us for today. Have a nice rest of the day, stay healthy, and I hope, as I'm sure everyone else does, that this crisis is going to end as soon as possible.